Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, sorry. We just had lunch and our job is to wake you up and get you engaged again. And this panel is sort of, if you all remember the Monty Python movie, and now for something completely different. So we are going to be talking about the importance of recruiting the best talent from across the nation on both sides of the aisle into service and support of our country's national security. And with me to help animate that conversation are four of our former CNAS Shawn Brimley Next Generation National Security leaders. Every year we get more than 300 applicants for 24 slots, and we have incredible young leaders who enter the program. It's all about leadership development. Over the 15 years that we've been doing this, I think we have nearly 400 alumni, and many of them now have progressed quite significantly in their careers to be seniors, policymakers, role models, mentors for others. The idea of this program really goes back to CNAS's founding. One of our core sort of differentiating principles is that not only did we want to produce the best intellectual capital for policymakers, research and analysis, reports and products, we also wanted to really invest in preparing the next generation of policymakers and business leaders, lawmakers, et cetera. And so today we're going to talk about that set of issues. And with me, I'm very privileged to have this panel. Let me first introduce Congresswoman, brand new Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander, who is serving in New Hampshire's 2nd District. Previously, she was a foreign policy advisor to Senator John McCain, a law clerk to Justice Stephen Breyer, and Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the U.S. Department of Justice, and also a U.S. Navy reservist. So welcome, Maggie. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have Congressman Pat Ryan, who I guess Maggie was class of 2011, and Pat Ryan was in the subsequent class, 2012. Congressman Ryan currently serves in the 18th District of New York. Prior to his time in Congress, he served 2 combat tours in Iraq, earning 2 Bronze Stars, and also served as the Ulster County Executive from 2019 to 2022. He is a West Point grad, and I think the first West Point grad to actually represent the district that West Point is in. Next, we have Rachel Hoff, who was in the NextGen class of 2015. She is currently the policy director at the Ronald Reagan Institute, previously a speechwriter and policy advisor on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and a researcher at numerous think tanks, including AEI. And then finally, we have Justin Johnson, who was in class of 2011. He is currently the head of strategy at Maitreya, which is an aerospace and defense company. Previously, he performed the duties as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, and also served as the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Defense. So 4 wonderful examples of how the NextGen program, it's all up to us, produce these wonderful public service servants from across the political spectrum. So let me start with a question. We'll just go down for the first one down the line to really, what motivated each of you to pursue a career in public service? And at such an incredibly, volatile and uncertain time, how do you find or maintain your sense of purpose and commitment to service? Maggie, let's start with you.
Well, can you all hear me all right? I could begin at the beginning, Michèle. I could begin with I was born on Election Day, actually, in New Hampshire. And it's kind of a big deal in New Hampshire, Election Day. My mom, Betty, was serving in the State House. She went to the polling place to vote before she went to the hospital where I was born, and that was really the spirit in which I was raised. The day I was born was the day that John McCain was elected to the United States Senate, too.
Oh, wow.
And I was so lucky to be raised by 2 parents who love this country, who really feel like we won the lottery in being able to be Americans. And my great-grandfather came to my hometown, Nashua, New Hampshire, when he was 16 years old, didn't speak a word of English. And the stories of my family were just a part of growing up for me, and it's an extraordinary inheritance to be born American and to be able to be a part of this experiment. And I think what gives me a lot of hope, honestly, is that nothing is inevitable in this country, and we've got I keep my Constitution with me everywhere I go, because for me and Pat, it's actually a pretty important document these days. I don't know how anyone does this job without it. I hand out copies on the floor of the House too, which for a lot of our colleagues is extremely useful.
They have to read it though.
They do. Sometimes I like to read it to them. But I think we've got the right causes, we've got the right values, we've got a framework that has been tested many times before, but what gives me hope is that nothing is inevitable, and that at the end of the day it comes down to good people who love our country and who want to be a part of its future. And its future is unraveling every day.
That's great. Thank you. Pat?
Well, thank you for including me. And similar to Maggie, I think family inspiration, I guess. My mom, who's a retired public school teacher, which is a form of public service I now know with young kids that I could not do, so give great respect to that form of public service. And my grandpa was a incredible, like many in the Greatest Generation, Purple Heart recipient, World War II, last ship sunk by a kamikaze pilot in the Pacific Theater at the end of World War II. And I just grew up hearing those stories, and then he came back and served in local office in my hometown, small hometown in upstate New York. So he was really my role model. And I think one of the things that a lot of us are trying to work on is how do we make that not an exception, but a norm in terms of every young person feeling an obligation and a duty to serve. And so national services legislation is something that I've been focused on in my short time in Congress, which there's bipartisan support, but we need to push it. So that's something that we're working on and would love to work with you all on. And young people want, this generation that I talk to a lot, and a lot of my staff are, make me feel old, I guess now, are of a different generation, and they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And we owe it to give those paths to them. I think a lot of young people don't feel that right now.
Right. Rachel?
Well, so much of my story starts with my upbringing as well. My parents are both retired public school teachers as well, and I was actually born and raised on a U.S. military base in Japan. And growing up in that environment, sort of being inspired by the public servants, the teachers at my school, including my parents, and also the service members, really kind of informed the way that I understood careers, I think, in a sense. And then also, frankly, growing up in a country that very much, it was very clear to me what the importance of the U.S. as an ally was. When I was in high school in Japan is when North Korea shot the first ballistic missiles over Japan that landed in the Pacific Ocean, and I could tell with our interactions, even with everyday people, that it meant a lot to have the U.S. military there and to have the United States at their back. And so I think that sort of shaped my desire to serve in this field of national security from the early days. In terms of what keeps me here, for me, that's about the community. It's about the people who come to Washington, D.C. because we believe we can make a difference and want to make our country and our world a better place. And even with all of the upheaval and chaos, I still think that's true. And so much about what you all foster with the NextGen program really brings those sort of ambitious for change and for difference, not just ambitious for career advancement, people together, and those are the people that I've really valued in my community.
That's great. Thank you. Justin?
Thanks, Michelle. Well, my story connects a couple threads here, which is I grew up in Iowa, so one of my earliest memories is going to an Iowa caucus meeting, my mom, being there, fighting for her positions. So this early sort of really intense experience of politics, locally, but with national impact. And then in middle school, my family actually moved to the former Soviet Union for a couple years, early 90s, and talk about whiplash, seeing two different sort of ecosystems, cultures, approaches to government and society. Came back to the U.S. from that, just with a deep appreciation for America being an amazing place, something that we need to protect and grow and develop. So I guess to then tie the other thread together here, there's, I think, to keep going, we have to tell our stories. We need to tell these stories of previous generations of people who have served in amazing ways, but then also keep hope for the future, right? I mean, we're telling the stories to remind us of what we can do in the future. And I think that's where forums like this and work from in Congress and places like that are really important.
Yeah. And also a wonderful lesson for current and future parents out there in terms of exposing your kids to those early public service situations that might inspire them in the future. So I wanted to direct the next question to our two members of Congress, which is, this is not a period that is terribly supportive of bipartisanship. I'm trying to be diplomatic here. And yet, it seems that it's so important if we're going to craft enduring, national security policies that have the broad support of the American people, that are going to endure over time and really, protect and advance our interests. So how are you thinking about bipartisanship, strategies to build it? What are the challenges you're facing? How do you overcome those? Maybe Pat, start with you.
Sure. I have one more year of learning of a steep learning curve, I guess, than Maggie, but I've already learned a ton from Maggie in our time serving together. Yeah, it's really hard, bordering on impossible right now to forge, especially on big issues, to forge bipartisan consensus. I think one constructive way to think about it, I would put out to think about is, I think the current framing of blue and red and D and R is really not meeting the moment, especially when it comes to national security and foreign policy. We're really seeing, I think, extreme elements of both parties sort of circle around the extremes and meet in the middle on this isolationist idea, which I emotionally understand some of where that's coming from, but is incredibly dangerous and counterproductive. So I think there's a real actually opportunity in the moment we're in to craft thoughtful, bipartisan in a new way, consensus around where we need to go. And just my last thought on that is that I think, I talked to a lot of my constituents, none of them feel like whether the executive branch or the Congress are setting a direction where we want the country to go, where we see the world going, and our role in that. And I think in that moment where it feels like we're treading water, it's easy to fight each other as we're doing. If we can orient again, and I think it's up to our generation to lay out that direction and rally people behind it. Easy to say, hard to do, but I think there actually is an opportunity moment.
Yeah. Well, I've been in the job now for almost 150 days, and it's been a long year. But I wanted to be on the Armed Services Committee and on the Small Business Committees, two committees that are still places in Congress where legislating happens, and it can only happen right now on a bipartisan basis. It's kind of an ever-growing margin, but when we started, 3-vote margin, the narrowest in a generation in the House of Representatives. But it has been really hard to count to 5, as Pat says, on anything of consequence. We won't stop trying, and we have a real opportunity coming up in the weeks ahead with the National Defense Authorization Act, which, for 63 years, and knock on wood counting, it's been the vehicle where we've really come together in a real way in Congress to get something done for the country. I think in theory, and this will all be tested, but I think I've been excited to see that we're speaking the same language when it comes to acquisition reform and some of the big ticket items for how we actually make America's defense industrial base work for the American people. But we'll see. I mean, this job requires a lot of emotional discipline because it's full of heartbreaks, people who let you down again and again, but who you've got to keep trying to work with, and that's the job.
That's good advice. So Rachel and Justin, I want to ask you a different question. Both of you have risen to positions where you are now hiring, growing, developing, mentoring young people. What are the skills, the values, the mindsets, the traits that you think the next generation should be developing to be effective as national security professionals?
The one that jumps out to me is that I think is sometimes overlooked as I am on the hiring side now, and I'm also a professor at the University of Texas in their semester in Washington program, so interacting with a lot of young people coming into this career space. So sometimes overlooked, I think, is sort of, I don't know if it's a skill, but just the ability to get things done. I find a lot of young people come here and they really want to work at a think tank doing research or be in a policy role, and obviously we're all policy motivated people and have a desire, like I was saying, to make the country a better place, and policies at the heart of that. But you will never be out of work if you are known and you have a reputation for knowing how to get things done. Not just sort of writing great reports is an important part of this ecosystem, organizing panels like throughout the day. But the team here who organized this event, Jasmine and Valeria and the rest of the team who put the nuts and bolts and the logistics together, that's a really important skill set no matter what you go on to do, whether you're working for a member of Congress. You got to have the right policy ideas, but you have to know how to do the outreach, to get the right members to co-sponsor the bills, to work with the committee staff to get some legislation included on the NDAA or what have you. And so the sort of, and the same is true for jobs at DoD or in the think tank space and elsewhere, just becoming known as somebody who's effective at getting things done.
Great, Justin.
Yeah, I completely agree, and would maybe summarize it down as be humble, be willing to do the hard stuff, the not so glitzy stuff, but also be curious, right? Always be learning, always be wanting to learn and try new things. And maybe just to expand on humble a little bit more too, the world's a really complicated, fast evolving place, right? And if you think you have it all together, you're going to be wrong. And in national security, that has consequences, right? And potential consequences that are very significant for individuals or for the country. So I think being willing to admit what you don't know, but being curious and eager to learn, those are the key characteristics. The details matter, the hone your craft, have a deep expertise in something 100%, but the mentality has to be humble and curious, I think.
That's great. So I'm often asked at the end of a session like this, because I'm often Debbie Downer as I do the geopolitical risk assessment for around the world. And then the inevitable question was, is there anything that gives you hope? And my answer is almost always the next generation of leaders that I see coming up. I have the privilege of continuing to co-chair the NextGen program, and gives me so much hope to see the talent flocking to public service, even in a very volatile, chaotic situation. And so I guess on that basis, what I'd ask you is maybe, again, starting with Maggie, there's so many challenging issues that we face as a country and in the world writ large. Are there particular areas where you think a next generation of talent it's particularly important that they bring new, different, fresh perspective? Like, where do we really need to kind of have a rethink, and where the next generation could really make a difference?
I can think of so many, but top of mind for me right now, the House has just voted on, I'll call it HR 1 because there's some dispute about, it's definitely big. Some people call it a beautiful bill. I don't think Pat and I would call it that. It's a bill that's going to bring about the largest deficit increase in American history. And we know one of the through lines of my work so far, a short time on the Armed Services Committee, but this has been true now for decades, that our debt is a national security threat. And we're gonna have to get it together. It's gonna take new habits of mind and heart. It's gonna take really good ideas, but we are gonna be left in short order. We already have at the moment, and we're gonna soon be left with an even bigger set of challenges to work our way out of. And so to me, this is where we're going to need really fresh ideas.
Yeah, great.
5 minutes, all right. Thank you. That's not for me, that's for everybody. I'll be very brief.
I show 6:22.
All right. I'll use 1 minute of that. So one, not that this is a small thing, but I think a more immediate thing, and Maggie rightly flagged this, I actually think there's great alignment bipartisan and bicameral and with the executive on sort of defense acquisition reform and figuring out how to move out of this industrial era post-World War II and World War II way that we buy things and build capabilities into in a new direction. And that's something I'm super excited about. I worked in that space after I got out of the Army. I know others on the stage have. I think that's a real opportunity space for us right now. And I know CNAS is doing a lot of writing and thinking on this, which has been great. So that I'm very optimistic about that. On a more, frankly, like grand strategic scale, I personally feel like the disconnect between foreign policy and national security discussions in and around DC versus in America, like in my district, is such a massive gap. We have to figure out how to reconnect and listen to the American people in terms of what they want and where they see the country going. I think both parties have lost some degree of touch of that, and it's hard work to restore that. But I think that will take a concerted effort to not just assume that this bipartisan consensus is just automatic and that we have to be constantly making a case and hearing from people. So that's something I know both of us are trying to do and others.
Well, my answer was aligned with the Congressman's point about sort of the defense tech and innovation issues that so many in Congress and the department have been leaning on. The Congressman certainly chief among them with the Defense Modernization Caucus. Yes. I think that's a place where young people are just kind of, especially the youngest generation entering the policy space, are just kind of like, disruption is second nature, right? So if our generation is Uber and the generation before us is taxi cabs, the generation coming up is whatever the driverless car one
flying
is.
Cars.
Flying cars, or the
Jetsons.
Waymo, or the driverless car thing in San Francisco. So I think there's just a dispositional paradigm shift, like a part of, hopefully some of those barriers will be easier to break down just because of that disposition among young people.
Justin?
100% agree on defense acquisition. That's a huge area for the next generation and current generation. And I think we're all in violent agreement here that it's everything, right? If the next generation isn't preparing to lead, then we're all in a world of hurt, right? But it's also an opportunity, right? It's great. They can. We don't know what tomorrow holds, but that the next generation is coming up is going to have all sorts of fun things to work on. Some of which we know, some of which we won't know until it arrives.
So we're going to do a lightning round. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about your answer, which is, what's the one piece of advice you would give to an up-and-coming next-gen leader in this field? But as you think, I realize there are some current next-gen leaders and alumni in the audience, and if you would, I'd like you to just stand so we can give you a round of applause.
Awesome.
Wonderful to see you guys here, both current and past. Thank you for coming. Okay, so we're going to go in reverse order because we've been picking on Maggie. So Justin, one piece of advice.
At risk of repeating myself, I think it would be humble, be curious, be hardworking, right? That combination of things, be passionate about what you're doing, and you'll go a long ways in national security.
My advice is go to every happy hour, and if there isn't a happy hour, organize one. Networking is just making friends.
Okay, good.
I would say that the single most important thing I've done starting with this program is invest in real relationships and real trust, because thankfully there's nobody from my class, I don't think, that can tell all the stories from our trip to Taiwan and Japan. But those folks that I met in this program, I'm still in regular touch with, and that has been incredibly, not only personally rewarding, but super professionally valuable. So just take the time to invest in those relationships.
Mm-hmm. I would say, and this is a little selfish, but it's also for Pat, don't give up on the United States Congress, because not giving up on America, which is the number one thing, means not giving up on Congress. And We need you to come to Congress to work with us. My first internship in high school was in the House of Representatives, and I fell in love with it immediately in all of its realness and complexity and frustrations. It's an extraordinary place to work. And so I'm going to make a plug for both of us. Please come and work with us in Congress.
That's great. I'm going to add my 2 cents on this, and those of you who've heard me speak about this will know what I'm going to say. Choose the boss, not the job. You can have the perfect job description, but if you don't find that boss who is going to be a role model and a mentor and someone who is going to invest in you and grow you over time, you're missing out. So that's my one piece of advice. We have 38 seconds left. So in that 38 seconds, please join me in a round of applause for our next gen leaders in the panel. Thank you. Thank you all.